CSIS 2470 is filmed before a live studio audience.
Today we're going to be diving into web forms. You'll see the title there, Web Form Basics, Enhancing the User Experience with JavaScript. As a front-end programmer, you'll find that web forms and the user experience, UX as we call it, are a significant part of your daily work. So let's take a look at the basic process here. First, you have the HTML form for the data entry. Whenever you fill out a form on a website, whether it's a simple contact form or a complex survey or whatever, you're interacting with the HTML elements, obviously. But the next piece of the puzzle is the front-end user experience. This is where JavaScript comes in. JavaScript makes forms interactive and user-friendly by doing data validation on the fly, showing helpful messages, which all these things we're going to get into in depth later. However, one thing to keep in mind that the validation that you do in JavaScript is typically preliminary validation because JavaScript can be disabled in your browser, right? And so if you don't have JavaScript turned on, then all that validation can go away. And there's ways to get around that. So that's where the final piece comes in, which is once you submit the form, the data is sent to a server so that it can be processed using a language like PHP or Node.js or Python or some other server-side scripting. These back-end scripts handle the tasks like storing the data in a database, maybe sending out an email, and this is where the quote real validation happens, right? That makes sure that the data is correct and it's safe and everything. The JavaScript validation is more sort of a front-end screening to filter out some things before we actually send it to the server. But worst case scenario, if somehow they bypass the JavaScript and it all goes to the server in bad form, bad format, bad data, etc., it doesn't matter because your PHP or your Node.js or your Python or whatever will do the final validation before the final step of whatever we're going to do with the data. So again, HTML for data entry, JavaScript for the front-end user experience, and then server-side scripts for processing. That's the basic flow of a web form. Now keep in mind for this class, however, that we won't be getting into the details of server-side processing. Instead, we'll be using JavaScript to process the form that we're about to build and other ones in the future. There are use cases in the real world where using JavaScript to process the form rather than the server side is very useful. For example, simple web-based games, like your upcoming homework assignment, AC/DC. There are other use cases as well, and we'll sort of see some of those along the way. So for now, let's dive into a simple example to just see the basic idea of how we would process a form using JavaScript. To the code. So the first thing we're going to do here is just make a simple web form with some basic information. We're not even going to worry about data validation or any of that. That's coming in a later lecture. We're just going to look at taking the data and having JavaScript be able to have access to it. That's all we're going to do for this first little thing right here. So let's start simple. We just want to have the user enter their name, and we'll just start with an input field. We're going to have two inputs here. We're going to have the first name and the last name, and so we'll put both of these as type equals text, and then we're going to put a label on both of them. Actually, we'll put the labels above, right here, here, and here. So label, and we'll say enter first name, and then we'll change this to last name, right? So now we have the label that goes with the input field directly below it. And then for screen readers, we need to make sure the label is actually properly attached to its associated input. The way we do that, the input has to have an ID, and we could just call this first name, or FN is fine, doesn't matter what you call it. And we'll call this one LN. And then the label has an attribute called for, and it needs to match the ID that it's for, so FN. So this label is for the FN input, and this label is for the LN input, right? So that connects them together, and that's useful for screen readers, and it's also useful for radio buttons and checkboxes. In fact, let's just take a look at that right now. Let's just make a simple radio button here that lets us choose our favorite color, for example, just something simple. So we have an input, and it's going to be a radio button, and we'll have a label to the right of it, and we'll say blue, and we'll do another radio button, red, and we'll do one more, white, and that's good. Red, white, or blue. Okay, let's just take a look at this live and see how it looks so far, and we will be doing some styling in a minute. So here it is in the browser, not looking too pretty. We'll deal with that in a minute, but you'll notice one thing here. If I click on blue or red or white, I'm allowed to check all of them. It acts like a checkbox. If I had a group of checkboxes where I could check a bunch of things, it's acting like that. Well, we don't want that, right? We want it to check only red, only white, only blue. So the way to fix that is simple. We just need to go in here to prevent them from acting like a checkbox, basically, and we need to give them a name, right? The name has to be the same for all of the elements that are supposed to be grouped together. So in this case, it's color, right? All of these are the same thing. They're the color survey, if you will, right? So let's come back and refresh. And now when I click on that, then I click red, it unchecks it. And when I click on white, it unchecks it. Now it's acting like a radio button. It's toggling between the views. Okay, we still have another issue though. And that is when I click on the word red, I would like it to select the red radio button, but it does not, right? When I click those, it doesn't do it. That's where this label business comes in. So we're going to give each of these an ID, and we'll go with B for blue and R for red and W for white, right? And then we can just copy that right there. Just copy those and we'll do it right here for like that. So now we have the 4 fields matching the ID field, or excuse me, the 4 attribute of the label matching the ID of the label. That connects them, as we were talking about earlier, for screen readers, but also now we have a different user experience. When I click on the word white, it will select that button. When I click on the word red, so that way I don't have to get my cursor to only fit in that little circle. Also, keep in mind, that's what it looks like when I don't have it zoomed in. Look how small that is, right? So if the user had to only click inside that circle, that's not a good user experience. So we want to click on the word blue. That's a little bit better user experience. Now we're going to scale all this up with our CSS in a minute, but just make sure that you think about what the user will be experiencing so that they have a better overall experience, hence the experience, right? UX, user experience. Okay, let's add a checkbox in here, and input type equals checkbox, and we will give it an ID of something in just a minute, and then the label. And what are we labeling? What is our checkbox going to say? Can we email you, right? Something like that. And so we'll say send emails, and it'll be just yes or no. And maybe let's reword this a little bit so it's more clear for the user. Send me spam, right? And that way it'll be checked or not checked. Okay, now again, we need to connect these two, right? So I can do for equals send emails. So now they're connected. If I come over here, refresh, you can see I can click the word and it'll check it. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning here, JavaScript is all about the user experience. You can't think about the user experience and not think about CSS, right? So they have to work together, and typically that is the deal. JavaScript and CSS work together. If you're a front-end programmer, that's your life. So let's take a look at CSS and JavaScript to make this a little bit better user experience. Doesn't have to be like super amazing, but let's get it better, right? So let's start off. We definitely need a submit button. We haven't done that yet. So we'll do input type equals submit, and we can leave it at that for now. And then we need to style this up so that it's calling attention to it, so they don't just come here and look at this messy looking form. Maybe we can stack it a little bit better, and maybe in here right above the radio buttons we can put something like an H3, which is what's your, like that. So that gives a little bit of a label there. The checkbox I think is fine as far as labeling goes. And then the last thing we want to do here is make sure we give a name to all of this stuff, right? And then we'll start styling it up. So input name equals spam. I'll just call it that. And the labels here for the inputs here, name equals first name and last name. Now notice here a couple of points. You'll see right here that the 4, which has to match the ID, so they're obviously going to have the same value. But name doesn't necessarily have to be the same as this. Sometimes it's convenient just to name everything the same, but it doesn't have to be. I could have called this anything like we did down here. This one, the name is spam, but the ID is send emails. It doesn't matter. As long as the ID and the 4 match, you're good. The name can be whatever you want it to be. Doesn't have to match anything in particular. The only case where it has to is when you're using a radio button here and you're grouping them together. Then they have to be the same. But again, it doesn't matter what they are as long as they're the same. Okay, let's go ahead and style it up, and then we're going to come back and make some more modifications to the form. But let's just start here with some simple stuff, and we'll look at inputs that are type equals text, and we'll do labels, and we'll make them display block. That alone will make it look a little bit better, right, where they're kind of stacking on top of each other. But you'll notice it moved those labels for the radio buttons and the checkboxes down below. We don't want that. So let's look at our structure here. Why did that happen? Well, because we made these labels display block. We don't actually want that in this case. So what we really want are labels that are above a text but not ones that are to the right of an ID of a radio button, right? So how do we do that? Well, there's lots of different ways we can do this, but a simple way is let's just target these specifically and give them their own style, right? So we can just target something like this. Go input, and then the direct sibling of the input type being radio is what we want here. We use the sibling selector and go label. So now this is going to target just the labels that are siblings to the radio buttons, right? And again, siblings meaning right next to them. This is the direct immediate sibling. We can also do the same thing here for checkboxes, right? And what are we going to do? We're just going to make those labels display inline block. And now if we refresh, we're back to what we're looking for. Now, obviously we still want to put some breaks here and make more spacing and clean it up a little bit, but we're starting to head down the right track here. Now I know we're doing a lot of CSS here. I just want to make sure you understand that it's important that we spend time thinking about the CSS and the layout, because all of this JavaScript stuff is all about user experience. And coming up in a couple lectures, we're going to be getting into how to take JavaScript and directly modify the CSS right in the JavaScript. And so you have to have our head wrapped around this relationship between CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so back to the code here. We're going to change the structure a little bit of this, and we're going to put these inputs into their own little group here so that we can just separate those, and divs by default are display block. So that'll separate those, and then we'll put this section here in its own div right there. And so again, that'll become display block automatically like that. So that alone will make a difference like that. All right, let's style the form up now. We can just center the form. That's always a good thing for some sort of a web form, especially like a login form or whatever. But this is fine for what we're doing here. Let's put a border on it first so we can see it. And you see that it takes up the full width of the page. We don't need it to do that. So what we can do is width, and we can use the property value max content, and it will only be as big as the largest thing inside of it. And we can throw some padding on there so it's not so squishy. So we'll go padding 20 pixels. That looks pretty good. And then we can center the whole thing. And we do that just by doing margin, maybe 10 pixels and auto. And now it's centered near the top of the page, right? That's a good starting point. So next up, let's look at some of these other things here. Let's give a background color to the whole page and a different color to the form. So maybe a dark background and then the form is white on top of that. So that's easy enough. We can just change the body and we'll make it background color like navy. That's a good one. And then of course that screws up our form, but that's okay because down here, we're just going to say background color is white again. And now we're back to where we were, but it's a little bit better. Maybe that navy is the wrong color. We'll find a different one maybe if we have time. But we now have the form here, and let's just give it a little bit better spacing, maybe better font. Let's just do font family Tahoma. And let's take a look here. Because we have this spacing here where the enter last name is kind of crammed up against the thing above it, and everything's sort of like that, let's put divs around everything. In fact, let's just move this div here so that the H3 is part of that block, right? And then we'll put a div around these right here and here and here. Right, so we can scooch these over and these. And so now it won't change much, but now I have all these divs where I can give them a margin that'll separate things a little bit. So that's easy enough. We'll just come in here, div, margin, like we'll do 10 pixels. That alone will make a huge difference, right? The only one that's a little off there is the submit button because it doesn't have a div around it, and we'll deal with that in a minute. But this looks pretty good overall, except that form is a little too not tall enough for my taste. And it's small. Remember, this is the normal size right here. This is very small, right? I've got it zoomed way in. So let's leave it small for a minute so I can style it to be bigger, right? So a simple way to start off with this is just make the text size bigger, right? So let's start with a simple thing for the whole page. Font size 30 pixels. See what that does. That's pretty good, right? That's not bad. And that's 100%, so it's not zoomed in or out. All right, now look at what happened though. Look at those little teeny radio buttons, the little teeny checkbox. And are we stuck, right? We can't change those in HTML and CSS? No, of course we can change those. And we will in just a minute, okay? First though, let's get this a little bit bigger here. And I just want to put a teeny bit of padding inside of these text labels here, right? Padding like 8 pixels. And now that looks a lot better. Okay. Now notice there's 8 pixels of padding before the enter name and above and below it, because this label is part of what's being selected here. So we actually don't want that on the label. So let's move that. And we only want that to be on the text. So right there. All right, so now refresh it, and that's a bit better. Okay, let's get rid of that red border around the form. Don't need that now that we know what it looks like. Let's give it a border radius, like 5 pixels, and we'll put a box shadow on it. That's 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and let's go with black. I think we'll work on this, and let's take a peek. And there is a shadow on there, but it's a little hard to see, maybe because we have a bad background color. Let's go with khaki for the background color. That's a pretty good one. That's too bright maybe. We'll play around with that in a little bit, but you can see that is the text shadow there. So let's make that, this is the blur property right here. Let's do 10 pixels for the blur. And now it's all the way around it, which is probably too much. So we'll do like 5, and we'll make these actually 0. So there's no offset. Those are the X and Y offsets. That's pretty good. It's not too in your face, maybe even smaller, like 3. And you'll hear me say this over and over again. For every 1 hour of HTML, there's going to be 3 hours of CSS. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to get to the JavaScript, obviously, but hopefully you see what we're trying to do there. This background color of yellow is not great, but for our purposes, we're just going to leave it like that until maybe later in the video. Let's get these buttons looking better. I mean, it is helpful that I can click the big old wording there, right? But I want those circles bigger, and that can be done. We can actually use these selectors here. Let's just redo these, and it's going to be checkboxes and radio buttons. And we will just style those to have a width of like 25 pixels and a height of like 25. Just see what that looks like. It might be too big, too small. That's actually pretty good. Maybe a teeny bit smaller. We'll go like 20. Let's see what that looks like. So that's pretty good looking. Now we just want to get that to where there's a little bit of space so that the word blue isn't crammed right up against the circle, or the send me spams right up against the checkbox. So the way we do that is in the labels here, which are right here, these 2 labels, and we'll just give them a little bit of a margin left of about 5 pixels, something like that. And let's see how that looks. And that affected the labels there. That looks pretty good, right? The only other thing I might do is put a little bit of spacing between each of these things, right? So let's put a bigger margin on the right of the label there. So we'll go margin right, and we'll do like 15 pixels. That's pretty good. Okay, last thing, let's get that submit button working, or styled up anyway, I should say. And we can just use submit, get rid of that comma so it's separate, and we'll just give it a margin of 10. And the reason I'm choosing 10 specifically is because that's what the divs have, and those divs are over by 10. So if you watch when I refresh, now it's lined up with them, right? And then the wording there is too squished inside of it. So you always want to have space for your text to breathe, right? So padding of like 10 pixels. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit too much on the top and bottom there. So we'll go maybe 5 pixels for the top and bottom. That's pretty good. Now we could color that button and style it, and maybe we'll do that another time, but this is good enough for now. It's a decent user experience. It's not amazing, but it's clean, and that's what it'll look like when it's at 100%. So it's a pretty decent size. I think that's fine. The last thing I want to do with our CSS is I want to make it to where when I hover over blue, red, or white, or this send me spam, that my cursor turns into a finger. Same with the button. It's really easy to do. For the inputs, we can just do cursor pointer. Now that's not quite what we're looking for. It's part of it. But now when I'm hovering over the field, I get it. And when I hover not on the word, but on the little button, I will get it. And over on this, I will get it. I also want it on that text there. But I don't want it on the inner first name or last name, but I do want it on these. So that is this set of labels right here. We'll just say cursor, and that should give us what we're looking for. So now when I hover over blue, that's clearly telling the user, yeah, click there, right? Now there are other fancy effects we can do, and again, another day. But here's the basic form, and this is ready to go. All right, finally, let's get to the JavaScript and process this thing, right?